We're here with Soledad O'Brien, who luckily agreed to do an interview with us right before commencement.
My pleasure.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I love commencements. I just love talking to people your age who are getting ready to go on to the next big thing, and it's very exciting for me. So I just love this.
All right, well, let's get right into the questions. So in regards to reporting on topics such as racism, which you have done pretty much your whole entire career.
Sadly, you can be very busy talking about racism in America.
As a journalist, how do you balance being objective while also calling things out as they are when you see them?
I think sometimes you see reporters who feel like getting to the truth is this side says this and this side says that, and as long as you have both sides, you're serving the truth. I just don't know how we got there because that's just not accurate. To me, the truth is really figuring out the context of something that has happened. What are the facts and the reality of a situation? So it's been very disappointing to me. Like, well, you know, they do have a side over here. There is a side. You can certainly give explainers and give context, but some things are just factual and truthful. So I think my job as a reporter is to get into the truth and try to understand people's positions, but not present everybody's position as if it is always truthful. Often it's not, right? If you look outside and tell me it's a beautiful sunny day and you say, well, it's kind of actually a little bit overcast, one of you is accurate. The other person also has a version. It just doesn't happen to be true. And I think for reporters, it's about really trying to dig into understanding the truth and the context.
Speaking of the truth, one of my questions for you is I've seen lately journalists becoming more candid about their positions on things like, you know, with the president referring to the media as the enemy of the people and then being very candid about that. I'm wondering, do you think journalism is moving forward with journalists kind of sharing their opinion more often?
Well, again, I think for journalists to share their opinion that they're not the enemy of the people, that's not really an opinion. I mean, like, they're people who are working in their own communities. So I think journalists are trying to defend against attacks on journalists and journalism. I've never been a big fan of leading with your opinion, mostly because I think it's irrelevant. Like, why would anybody care about my position on abortion? It's irrelevant. I'm here to interview a person, and my position will frame some of my questions, but at the end of the day, I want to hear from the person who's been invited to talk to me. So I'm not a big fan of leading with my opinion on a news program, but I think our opinions always frame sort of how we're going to think about asking questions, right? Let's say the two of you really, really dislike me. I'm sure the tone of this interview would be very different. And by the way, that would be cool because I would still have an opportunity to answer questions in any way that I wanted to, right? I mean, it's going to shape how you feel and what you bring to the interview. That's just the reality of it. But I don't think your opinion gets to lead my interview. My interview is going to stand as my interview.
I think it's fair to say that you enjoy telling stories that aren't often told and getting voices that aren't often heard from, specifically with survivors, which is like a new topic in the media that's now starting to be covered. How do you think journalists should go about telling those stories? They're complex and complicated without picking a side when they're telling a story.
Yeah, I think that you have a really good opportunity, especially when you're talking to survivors of whatever, to dig into both the nuance and the detail of their point of view. I mean, historically, what's happened is we just sort of ignored their point of view, right? It just sort of didn't matter at all. And I have been on many a panel, and I have seen many a panel that's like a women's panel that has no women, right? Or a panel about, the black vote that has no black people. It happens all the time. So I think that it's about point of view, right? It's about saying, well, let's include people who are part of this conversation in the conversation. That doesn't mean you're necessarily saying they're the only people in the conversation, but you're saying we're not going to have a conversation around them that doesn't include them. And historically, we've done that a lot in the media. We've done it a lot. One of the things I tried to do was to hand the mic back to people and say, well, talk to me about what it's like to be poor. Talk to me about what it's like to be in a shelter, because there's a whole bunch of other people, elected officials, people who are protesting, even people who are your advocates who are talking for you. But you, who's here, just tell me. And I think it's as simple as just handing a microphone to someone and letting them share their experiences. And by the way, they're not all going to agree, but it's inserting a certain amount of truth back into a conversation that I think is important. The worst thing that can happen is when other people are sort of giving, their version of you. And one of the things I'll talk about in my commencement speech is I think it's really important to, obviously I love storytelling, but you have to share your own valid story. You have to stand up for the things that are true in your life and not allow other people to sort of tell the story that they think is yours.
My last question is, as a woman of color, what are some of the challenges that you face being a storyteller?
You know, I mean, I'm very aware of some of the obstacles for women of color. You know, all you have to do is look at the data points and they'll tell you there's not a lot in leadership. There's not a lot in the executive ranks. There's not a lot in anchoring the evening news. There's not, so the data tells that story. But at the same time, I'm not a big believer in telling people what the data means for their life. I think as a woman of color, you've got, as a human being, you bring a different perspective and a different point of view, and you get to explore those stories. That those are valid stories too. Some of the most important stories that I've done and that have done the best, because everything is measured in ratings, is a look at women who were rescue workers on Ground Zero. And everybody rolled their eyes and told me it wouldn't do well. And it won, of course, and it won because a lot of guys watched it too, because it's just a compelling story. And so this myth that there's no viewer for somebody else's story is just a load of crap. I mean, and it's frustrating to have to constantly beat back that myth. So I would say, as a woman of color, find the stories that are compelling to you and do a good job telling them. And as a woman who's not of color, and as a guy, and as a white guy, a gay guy, a straight guy, a whatever guy, of color, not of color, as a human being, find those human stories and then work like hell to bring out the element that makes people who are not whatever they're saying on camera say, oh my God, that story was amazing, right? It's bringing the humanity out. Don't worry about other people's checklists. I mean, be aware of it in the back of your mind, but if you are constantly focused on, here's what doesn't happen for women of color, here's where women are not allowed, you're gonna lose your mind. You'll literally lose your mind. So don't give people that power.
You have to give your commencement speech soon, so we do have to wrap this interview up.
We'll just do it right here.
I just want to thank Ms. O'Brien for being here
Soledad,
today.
please.
And this was a true pleasure. Thank you so much.
The pleasure was mine.